This episode is all about redefining home. The question is, what is home? What is home for us expats living abroad? And what is the heart of our home? So in my case, I would say, besides of my family, of course, is home is where I start feeling like a local.
And for me, home is where I feel like I have community and I have people that I can talk to and trust. All right, so in your 15 years living abroad, right, there had to be a point in time where you realized, oh, I'm home. And I'm sure a point in time where it may even feel weird to say your home country is Mexico because you have felt at home in other countries. And I'm curious, because I don't think we've really talked about this in detail either. I'm curious what makes a place home for you?
For me. So yeah, I need to think about it because of course like home is something very like subjective and very specific to each of us. If I can define home, or if I can say when did I start to feel at home overseas, it was definitely when I started to feel like a local. When I really started to feel like, oh, I'm not being an outsider anymore, but rather like a part of the community. And with that, I mean, when I moved to Germany the first time, when I started to be able to communicate in their language. Like when I really started, that was to me like the turning point where I felt like, oh, okay, I'm no longer a visitor or just like an expat living there, an immigrant. I am just part of their community. And when you reach that point, at least from my own perspective, when you reach that point, then you feel like, oh, this place starts to feel like home. And then another thing is when you start just to do things like locals do. To me, it's all about like blending into the culture. So from my own perspective, it's like, yes, my home is, of course, after all these years, still Mexico. And I go back there and I just recharge my batteries and I just feel at ease and at home. But I learn also to develop this sense and this feeling also while living abroad. And specifically with Germany, it was to me like when I started to act and maybe to communicate as a local, meaning like there was a big linkage to the language, to the German language. Once I started doing that, people started to accept me even more. Like new doors started to open. So to me, that was like, oh, sense of home, of truly being at home in a place.
I love that. And I think that that's so important because when we talk a lot about culture, I think one thing that is a defining moment in culture is language. And
Absolutely.
regardless of your race, regardless of where you're from, regardless of your gender or your background, I think that in a lot of countries, and it's not every single country, right? But I think in a lot of countries, if you can speak the language or at least are making an attempt
Yes, at least
to
just
speak
to
the
try.
language.
And coming to your point, is like two things that go like very well like together. One is the language. Yes, you gotta speak the language of the place you are at now, just because you wanna be able to communicate. But like the second one is like also the culture behind that language. Like it's not just like mere words; it's a whole history behind that. And it's a lot of cultural things. Like to me, it felt like home, and also for my children, when we started to do like the things that the other people did. Like, they have like for Christmas, they have like this Nicolaus Day, which is always on the 6th of December. So that's very specific. Or for example, like this German thing maybe of not like celebrating your birthday before your actual birthday. Like, like there is a lot of tiny little things behind a language. So it's not just only like speaking that specific language, but also like understanding their culture. And once you get like kind of both, then you can like really like deep dive into their culture, and then it's probably when you just start feeling at home. I remember also your husband told us that like once he started learning like Swahili because he was living in Tanzania, then everything like shifted towards a homey feeling, right?
Exactly. And when he's in Tanzania and he speaks Swahili, they immediately tell him, "Oh, you're not white, you're my brother, and this is my
That's amazing.
sister-in-law."
Yes,
Right?
yeah.
And so it totally shifts that dynamic. Now, for someone like myself, who I'm sure a lot of our listeners may be like this, where it is challenging to learn a language. I'm not linguistically talented. For me, it's about community.
Yes.
So where
100%.
I feel like home is where I've been able to build a community where I can call someone and say, "Look, I'm having this issue, or can you help me?" Or I
I'm
have this.
struggling. I need help, and you have your
Exactly.
network.
Exactly. And I think that, it's hard too, being honest, being our age, going into a new country, having to build a new community, and wanting to make friends for who you are and your identity, and not because of your child, or not
Yes,
because of your husband's work, or not because of your work, or, but really I want to connect.
it's
And
your own identity and your own like journey at the end of the day. Yeah.
exactly. And I think that's something that we, have, that I'm super grateful and feel blessed,
Yeah.
blessed about, is we met outside of all of that.
Yes,
We didn't meet
absolutely.
because our kids are in the same school. We didn't meet through our husbands. We didn't meet through work. We met and connected because of who we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And I think those are the best relationships. That's when I feel like, oh, wow.
You have a sense of home when you reach that point with specific people. Yeah.
Exactly. I think that that's really important. And then the other thing I think for both of us, you didn't mention, but I'm going to speak for you. You tell me if I'm wrong. It's also just making your house feel like a home,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like, for example, in my case, like everything changed. For example, when we relocated or when we moved, when we moved from Germany to South Africa, because it was a completely new continent, like not even country, like it was outside of Europe. So living out of the sudden in Africa, many other languages, because here you speak like you have 11 official languages and all of that. So to me, like the point where I felt like, oh, this is starting to feel like home is when, for example, our container arrived with all our belongings, with the toys of my kids, with the story books that we used to read, when, like all of these like things that might be material things, but like to us, they go beyond that just because they have a meaning. Like, like the book that I read at school at that point, like, like this kind of like sentimental objects or treasures that you have collected over time, and then finally they arrive at your place. I had the feeling like at that point, like we could just like feel like, okay, we are here, we are at home. So it has also to do with your home, even though I believe it's not a physical, it doesn't need to be necessarily a physical place, definitely a place where you feel at home, where you feel at ease. And of course, maybe for even more for our kids, right? Like if they have their own stuff, their own toys, their own books, their own whatever, then it's of course easier.
Exactly. Yeah, I was thinking about it as you were talking. My top three, I would say probably my top three things that make any environment I'm in feel like home, especially in this global context. One would be, as I think we both agree with, family.
Absolutely.
Right? Having your family there. And I know that's a challenge for some people. We're also very lucky that we're in expat situations where we're able to be with our partners and we're able to have our kids with us. I know others who aren't able to bring their spouse with them for whatever reason, and they've lived abroad and they travel, back and forth.
Or they're on their own. So then it's another, for example, my brother, like he's also overseas. So he's not in Mexico, but for him it's a completely different experience just because he's facing all of these challenges. And also the nice part, like alone, he doesn't have now a family. So his experience is surely different to my experience.
Exactly. We need to bring him him on and hear his experience of
Yes.
home. Yeah, so it's definitely that family. I think the second thing for me is that community
Mhm,
piece
mhm.
of it. And then the third piece for me, and I think that community piece, going back to that, includes your language. Like, it's how do you
Yes.
really
Mm.
build community? And part of like going all the way in is being able to speak the language, right? It is really becoming a local in the context you're at. And then that third piece for me is what we talked about, which is like making your house your home, right? And like
Yeah,
really taking
100%. Yeah.
the time. And I think it's hard sometimes when you know people will move abroad and they're like, I'm only going to be there a year.
Yes, when you
I'm
start
only
from day one with that like mindset, but then you never know. We have like
mm-hmm.
proof the opposite very often here with our friends that at the end, like life comes, life happens, someone gets pregnant, whatsoever, or you get a promotion. It doesn't matter, and then your plans change.
Plans change. I mean,
Mm.
my husband and I thought we'd be in South Africa 18 months. 18 months.
Really?
Yes.
Ah, I didn't know 18 months.
18
Okay,
months.
okay.
And we came here with barely anything. We just said, oh, we're only going to be there 18 months. We got all this advice around, well, don't like bring all of your nice furniture. It's going to get ruined in the
Yes, yes,
container.
yes.
Just leave it in storage. And that probably ended up being the worst advice that we
But
got.
probably that advice wasn't, maybe, I don't know, maybe coming from someone who has experienced all of
Mm,
this several times, because I am sure
yep,
you wouldn't suggest that to
not at all.
new people, like, to people trying to, like have this experience for the first time. Probably you wouldn't say that because by now, or we know by now how
Exactly.
important it is just to, like, you're living now, you're living today, so you
Today.
do it like whatever it takes for you and your family to do it now, so they
Exactly.
they feel at home.
Exactly. And that's such a great point because, as we've talked about, is that the importance of reaching out to people.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that you're reaching out to folks who have had the experience, right? And even with that, that doesn't mean you need to take everybody's advice. You also have to filter through, to your point, of like what's important to you, what do
Yeah,
you
what makes
prioritize?
sense, what not for you.
Exactly. But yeah, we thought 18 months. We're going on 6 years. So, you just
Uh,
never know what life is going to bring you, what your evolution's going to be, what your story is going to be.
yeah,
And so you want to create your home. Whatever that means
absolutely.
for
Yeah,
you,
for
you
you and
want
your
to create
family.
your home wherever you are.
And it's doable. I mean, for many people, it's like just like uh, they can't even start to imagine that it's possible to create a home away from home. But it is, like, also just to be like a bit like brave and say like, yes,
Mhm.
I'm gonna make it work outside. But it's also a decision. I think
Mhm.
we are choosing this life every day, and we're
Mhm.
deciding actively to be happy far away from our home country or birthplace.
Exactly.
But you gotta take that decision. You are gonna gotta work on it, and just don't expect that it's gonna feel at home and amazing just
Just
because it
because.
won't.
Exactly. And you know what has come to me just as you're talking, Gisela, is Brene Brown. So I don't know how many people are familiar with Brene Brown, but her
Mhm.
work is all around vulnerability.
Oh, tell me more. I
And
don't.
yes,
Mhm.
and the importance in our growth as just individuals, as humans, to be vulnerable. And part of
Yeah.
vulnerability is stepping outside of your comfort zone.
Yes.
If you're staying in your comfort zone all the time, you're never taking the chance to be vulnerable, to actually learn from that vulnerability, to show it to others. We talk throughout this entire season around the importance of sharing.
Yes. Absolutely.
And part
Mhm.
of sharing is being vulnerable because people
Yes.
may have a point of view of what you're sharing.
Yes, and then you might also share your failures, right? You're not just sharing your
Mm-hmm.
wins. I mean, would be nice, but this is not only, like this journey has definitely like these two sides.
Yep.
So in order maybe for make it smoother to others, you also gotta share your failures, your mistakes, whatever, and
Exactly.
it's part of the journey. Yeah.
Exactly. I'd love to, and this is not something that telling our audience was actually in our topics, but I want to ask Gisela because it just came to me.
Uh-huh.
Is I feel like you've had a lot of experience in your family when we talk about creating home
Mm-hmm.
around also balancing wellness and balancing work life, balancing mental wellness, like making sure when you really talk about this is our home, that we can be all of who we are. And that means the things that aren't working well and the things that are working well, and how you all have created the space to be able to support that regardless of where you guys are living. And so I'd love to hear like
Yes.
a little bit of just how you've done that, because I know, that's been something that you've had to work through. I think for my family, we've had to work through, as well. It's not always easy to
Yes.
create a home, right?
Yeah, it's not always easy, and you also gotta have a bit of grace with yourself and just understand it's a process. It's not just from today until tomorrow, but rather a longer process until you feel okay. I'm at ease. And how do you like also make everyone in your household, in your family, feel like at home? It starts with the kids. To me, it was always very important, and every time that we relocate or move, that it's also fair for them. So a lot of storytelling, a lot of sharing, a lot of like trying to also give space,
Yeah.
even though sometimes it's difficult. Also, like between us as a couple, it's important, of course. Like we are always functioning, and we're trying to make everything work at the same time.
Yeah.
So also like to be mindful about that and just say, okay, this is our new setting now, and we are happy. However, we need some space, or sometimes just to say, you know what, it's a lot now. Let us go back home. For example, after being a year in Germany, we all of us felt like, okay, we are kind of craving a bit of our old life in South Africa. Let us book a ticket, if and go back there, even if it's just for holidays. So you gotta find like your little something. And of course, I am very aware we're talking about a very privileged standpoint.
Yep.
Many people
Yep.
can do that very
Yep.
easy, just to say, oh, okay, let me just book a flight and go. But like it can be in many ways. Sometimes it's just it's also fine if I can just call my mom and have a very like good conversation, or if I can send like even like sometimes like a bit of old school things, like send an actual postcard, because who does that nowadays? So it has maybe a bit more of an impact. Things like that, just like always trying to find ways to make yourself feel better in this new setting, and then also just recognize when it's too much, because sometimes it's just too much.
Well, exactly.
And that's also fair.
Exactly. And I think that comes to, when we talk about home, a big piece of home we said was family. And we don't have our full families with us, right? When we're traveling abroad. Like, yes, we have our partner, we have our children, but we don't have our parents, we don't have our siblings,
Yeah.
And I do think that's a big part of what you're talking about in terms of recognizing, because that's a part of our wellness, right?
Yes.
We have people, I know that you had family members that passed away when you were here in South Africa.
Yes, I remember.
Right.
Yes.
Which was hard for you being far away from family. Like my parents are getting, older. Kyle, my husband's parents are getting older. And it's challenging.
It's the other side of the coin.
Yeah.
And you also gotta take some decisions sometimes, like, okay, maybe I won't be doing like this holiday somewhere else, or like, I don't know, maybe I won't be like spending this time elsewhere, but I need to go back home and just take care of whatever needs to be taken care of.
Exactly.
And yeah, it's a lot of awareness and a lot of commitment also to your roots, to just not say like, oh, sorry, because at some point, probably our family back home, they will need us more. Like maybe for now it's still okay, at some point they will need us more, maybe our parents, maybe siblings, you name it. So just to be also very mindful about that.
Yeah, I think it's so important, because it's not easy. It's not a 1, 2, 3 answer on how you make a home. It's complex, right? And you have to start with building it, having your family there, creating that home, creating that community, working on the language, and also recognizing there are other pieces, right, that are going to come up, and how you navigate through that.
It's a whole puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm curious, Gisela, for our takeaways for our listeners, what would you say was that point when, in your evolution of how you would define when a place became your home?
So to me, it's like what I mentioned before, a big discovery, if I can call it that way. it was to understand home is not necessarily a physical place. It doesn't need to be like the place where I grew up or necessarily the first house I lived in. So you kind of develop a bit of a sense of, okay, I can make it again somewhere else. So it's not necessarily physical, it's where I feel at home. And as I mentioned before, is where I started to feel like a local. So that's to me where like more like my home place. And even with South Africa, it started feeling like that because I started just feeling at home. After 3 years, I was like, yes, in this place, I feel at ease. I'm trying to do like the locals do. I'm trying just to blend into this culture. So people, I remember back in Mexico, they were asking me like, but do you feel at home there? Like, it's just so different. And like after Europe, like how? And I was like, yes, pretty much. And if you ask me today, like, would you relocate back to South Africa? I would always say yes, just because of that had a lot of meaning for us, for my kids. My kids grew up like 3 years from their short life here. So it's something important. And it, to me, it was like this main discovery is not only a physical place or not only where you grew up, but rather a place where you feel like a local.
I love that. And I think, for me, a takeaway for our listeners is that there's always an opportunity to build a home, regardless of what the situation is, whether you are having an expatriate opportunity or experience as a single person, as someone with a partner, as someone with a partner but has to go alone for a period of time. Really spend the time thinking about what could be a home for you. How could that home be created? And take the small steps to start putting that in place. That's when you truly feel comfortable. That's when you truly feel like you have a home and can get the most out of your global experience. Thank you for listening to this episode. Our next episode is going to be on personal branding. Don't forget to follow us and subscribe. We'll see you soon. So, this episode, we want to talk a little bit about business globally. And it's great to live abroad. We also have to put food on the table. And what does that actually look like and mean? For me, I came to my first expat assignment, which was back in 2009. With my job, then I had the opportunity to come to my second expat assignment. And I will say the biggest thing that folks need to understand and know, and Giselle, I think you've experienced this as well, is that, yeah, you have to have technical skills anywhere you go, any country that you're living in, even if you're working locally. But what's different about being successful globally is having, and I hate the word soft skills, to be honest, because they're not soft. They're actually the harder ones.
That's so true, yeah.
To pick up. But what you hear people say as soft skills, that's what makes or breaks you globally. So what does that mean? We're going to talk a little bit in this episode about that. It is about emotional intelligence. It's about cultural competence. It's about being agile and flexible. It's about being able to communicate with different communication styles. It's about being curious. It's about taking complexity and simplifying it. And these are the skills that create global business leaders that are able to get that opportunity to really thrive in what would be an international environment.